Hello, everyone, and I wanted to go ahead and take a quick moment to introduce myself. My name is Rebecca Massey. I live in the Surprise community of North Copper Canyon, and I am the individual who created the Grand Failure site as well as created the petition on change.org. I wanted to take a moment because I know after the holidays and even right before the holidays, things were very chaotic. And in the midst of all of that, Councilman Haney had his District 1 community meeting back on December the 20th. And there were definitely a lot of people who couldn't make it just due to the holidays, which is totally understandable. And there was an ask to kind of summarize what had happened. So I will go ahead and run through the presentations real quick. Before I do that, for those of you who are not familiar, the site is very easy. It's just the grand failure altogether, like it's one long word, .site, SITE. And from there, you can see there's some buttons at the top as well as some icons if you scroll to sign the petition, lodge a complaint or feedback, whatever you'd like to call it, to the City of Surprise about our traffic concerns, and then also contact government officials. The speaking order was kind of switched up at Councilman Haney's meeting a little bit. I am going to present this back a little bit out of order just because the presentation from Councilman Haney himself does run through pretty quickly and give you some updates directly from the city before we get into the presentations from the two special guests that were present. And those guests were MAG, or Maricopa Association of Governments, and then ADOT, or our Arizona Department of Transportation. So let's go ahead and get into it. These are the slides that Councilman Haney went through, as well as some other folks within the city. Again, you can see District 1 community meeting, December 20th. And just real quick to go back to the site, these are all linked under presentations in the top navigation bar, if you want to reference them yourself. So what we kicked off hearing with from the City of Surprise after MAG and ADOT had spoke was a quick update on the GO or GO bond projects, talking about 163rd Avenue improvements. And they've essentially broken it up into different segments, and two segments are in the first phase. The last segment is the second phase of the projects. They have a 5-year construction improvement plan, and the scope is to widen 163rd Avenue from Grand all the way up north to Jomax and work on some traffic signal improvements. So phase 1 is from the 60 to Pat Tillman, and also Pat Tillman up to Happy Valley Road, basically. And what they're looking to do is to expedite with this bond the widening of 163rd Avenue, and also to improve the signals. Because as it stands right now, you've got the bidirectional traffic going north and southbound on 163rd, and then a stop sign at Happy Valley Road, and that can be very dangerous to turn left from Happy Valley onto 163rd Avenue to get to Asante, for instance. And they do plan to phase things in the future as well for this. Where they are at right now is in the first phase, and that is, again, talking about from the 60 up to Happy Valley, basically, and then a little bit up to, what was it? I think it was Desert Moon. Yeah, Desert Moon Way. And right now, it is very early stages because this bond was just passed. I want to say it was like end of summer, beginning of fall timeframe, if I recall correctly. Or it might have even been in November. The year's just flown by, and it's hard to believe we're already in 2024. But anywho, they're in the early design phases, and during the fiscal year from 26 through 2027, They're working to coordinate with the developers, the state land, the county land, and then currently from multiple sources within the city of Surprise, including Councilman Haney himself and our city manager, Bob Wingenroth, that part of the planning phase that we're in right now is there's utility lines. So like fiber optic, water lines, power lines, things of that sort that are in the equation here that need to be moved, relocated, or built around depending on the type that's there. And so those discussions are being had, and then they're planning for 2028 to actually begin the construction. Of course, we need to continue to apply pressure there and continue to try and advocate to fast track things for sure. But that's essentially where things were left at with items from the city specifically. I know that Councilman Haney does have another meeting coming up on Tuesday, the 9th of January. So that is next Tuesday. And it's going to be held same place, Asante Preparatory in the cafeteria at 6:30 p.m. I do have an event linked on Facebook, and there is an event linked on the City of Surprises calendar. So that pretty much encapsulated everything that the city specifically talked about. ADOT presented first, and I think that it makes the most sense to present ADOT first from the two special guests. So I'll go ahead and run through that with you guys right now. So ADOT kicked things off essentially patting themselves on the back about the restriping on the westbound lane, specifically the now 2 turn lanes that we have to turn north onto 163rd Avenue, the green arrow, things of that sort. And really, what we should be doing is patting ourselves on the back, because if it weren't for the pressure that we have applied collectively as a community via emails, petitions, press coverage, things of that nature, I don't think that we would have gotten that moved up so quickly. Still a lot left to be desired, obviously, because these are short-term improvements. And in my opinion, restriping some of it and then saving the rest of the restriping for summer, I'm still trying to wrap my head around the logic on that. But be that as it may, there's a couple of photos here. Those of us that drive these intersections every day kind of know roughly what this looks like. And then ADOT moved in a little bit more, right, to how they're going to continue the short-term improvements through our summer. And that is specifically getting a third left-hand turn lane coming down from 163rd right here, where my mouse is at, turning onto the 60 to go and get on the 303, head into town, whatever you need to do. Part of that, and hopefully they do it simultaneously. At the meeting, it seemed like it was going to be simultaneous, so hopefully that's the case. But they're going to be widening these eastbound lanes of the 60 to also have 3 lanes, and then add in some sidewalk and other ramp modifications and so forth to be ADA compliant with the area. There's also some other projects that are happening for entries and exits onto the Loop 303. And that's really like a dedicated off-ramp, a dedicated third left turn lane from northbound Loop 303 to go westbound on the 60, like you're heading towards Whitman or what have you. A dedicated right-hand turn lane from the northbound Loop 303 to eastbound 60. And then they're also looking at widening these branches, if you will, too. There's still some feasibility studies that are being done, and they are still reviewing the feasibility study that was done previously to look at a plan for long-term improvement. But it is important to know, everyone, they don't have a long-term plan as it stands right now. They don't have, like, even what I like to call that delusions of grandeur stage when you're trying to figure something out of like, hey, here's my pipe dream solution of what this would look like. They don't have anything like that, and they have not shared anything like that. ADOT hasn't. They have some recommendations for grade separation and things of that nature. But again, they want and are saying it's going to require an additional study, public input, things of that nature. And then also, this is going to be included on a proposition on the November ballot, Prop 479, and more on that in a minute when we get to Mag's presentation here next. But they don't have a plan. And that is where everybody continuing to keep that pressure on, continuing to share, sign the petition if you haven't, continue to send those emails, things of that sort, really comes into play here. We have to continue to advocate for ourselves because there are some truly legitimate safety concerns beyond just the inconvenience of, oh, great, traffic again, I'm going to be 15 minutes late to work or whatever it is, right? So I'll get into, so before I skip over to Mag's presentation, sorry. But Mag's presentation talks a lot about historical elements, different propositions like Prop 479 that's going to be on our ballot and things of that nature. But I'll pause on this slide real quick. If you want to keep up to date with the goings on at ADOT, you can scan the QR code, pause it if you need to, or you can email Carolyn. I've had numerous email exchanges with her. She's been very informative. And she actually pulled me aside at Councilman Haney's meeting, and I got a chance to meet her in person and introduce myself, meet her face to face, and all that good stuff. She actually thanked me and the awareness that not just me, but really all of us are bringing to the area in making sure that this gets solved, because she acknowledges and understands our concerns and kind of where we're coming from. So if you haven't connected with her, you want to reach out to her directly, please feel free to do so. I encourage you to do so. I'm going to go ahead and get into this overview of MAG and Prop 479. Caveat before I get into this is a lot of heavier content, and so there are going to be certain slides that I will kind of skip over just to keep the video shorter and sweeter as possible. And this does kind of, both in the room and then as I read through it again, I don't want to say like propaganda because it's not the right word, but it feels like a Prop 479 commercial or like a campaign spiel that a candidate who's sponsoring this proposition or in favor of this proposition would read out on. So take it with a grain of salt for those of you who are not a big fan of propositions that add or continue tax dollars coming out of your paychecks, whether it's sales tax like this one or something else. This first slide talks about the MAG regions and everything that MAG supports. You can see that it's a very vast area. And you can see some demographic information over here on the right-hand side of the slide. This slide, I'll pause here just for a quick second. This is some committees that individuals within the city of Surprise are on and serving with MAG as well, and just the representation. So this is where we get a little bit into the historical items, where the very first inception of this half-a-cent sales tax is what these propositions are, was in 1985 on the ballot, before, if we scroll back up here, before many of what is largely becoming a good chunk of our demographics in this area that MAG serves, were born, right? Myself included. My husband has been alive for a couple years at this point, but I still wasn't quite that twinkle in my parents' eye just yet. But you can see Prop 300, half-a-cent sales tax, and then 20 years later, Prop 400, and that takes us all the way through from 86, I think, is when the sales tax would have gone into effect, all the way up to 2025. Is when Prop 400 finally comes to an end. And this is kind of historically what our regional transportation network, I know those of you who are Arizona native or very close to a native, I've lived outside of Arizona a little bit. I was not technically born here, so I'm close, but not quite a true native. I do remember when really the 10 and the 17 were the only highways to speak of, and then you did have the 60, but it was kind of that, much like it is today in a lot of areas, our area included, it's a highway that's not a highway because it has stop signs and streets, stoplights and things of that nature. And then you can see from 86 to 2005 is when we started getting things like the 51, the 101, the 202. And I remember living just kind of over here, Deer Valley and Cave Creek Road, as a child growing up in Arizona when the 101 was being built. And there was really, like, Cave Creek and Deer Valley was nothing. And now there's so much there, and we've continued to build out further west, which is demonstrated, right, when we get into the work that Prop 400 has done with these other improvements, right? The new section of the 202, more build outs, right? 303 being built out. And then obviously additional investments. And I don't want to get on a soapbox about any of the other, like, additional investments that are here, because that'll completely sidebar everything. But feel free to research this, because it's definitely interesting, the things that we spend money on that may or may not make the most sense. This is the proposition timeline. So again, this is where I was talking about, it gets a little repetitive, gets a little like just high level items, but where things start to get a little bit more interesting, I think, and what a lot of average members of the community don't realize unless they have done the research, like I've been trying to do since getting involved with all of this, is there's a whole performance-based evaluation process that MAG goes through for our regional road developments, improvements, things of that sort. And myself, I didn't really spend a lot of time into this, or I mean, I looked at it, and I've looked at it again a few other times since then. I'm looking at it right now, right? I'm a project manager professionally, and so this is a lot of kind of my bread and butter of how I work my way through things and how I prioritize my work at my employer, of risks, benefits, scenarios that can play out, different options that are available, things of that sort. So I'll pause here for just a second, and feel free to pause the video if you want to take a look at this more in depth, or go to the site, get the PowerPoint presentation and look at it yourself. But this is kind of how MAG goes through and looks at things that are presented to them, or that they become aware of areas needing improvement. And this is kind of where you can see, not that this is a heat map per se, but these orange dots represent intersections or different traffic interchanges and whatnot that need to be addressed. And that MAG essentially has to feed all of these data points through this evaluation process. And you can see, and I mean, obviously there's a bunch of orange stacked up dots over here in the East Valley, and then centrally, along the 17 and the 51 and the 101 and whatnot. And obviously it makes sense, right? Because there's more people in these areas. However, I would be really curious, because I don't see anything in here that really talks. It's all about like fiscal constraints and things of that nature. It doesn't necessarily, and you see study, like we keep seeing things like study and possible regionally significant program here, like safety, right? Where you're talking about air quality and things of that sort, pavement preservations. This feels kind of like safety is an afterthought to me, because it's not up here in kind of the forefront area. And it would be really interesting to me if somebody collectively were able to pull all of the data points and see, safety wise, what our situation looks like as it compares to, like, if you're talking like accidents per million cars on the road, or something like that, where it's not going to be, well, obviously there's more people, so there's more accidents. Now I'm talking like a per capita type scenario. And these are MAG's goals, right? Where they're talking about safety, mobility, responsiveness, right? Livability, preservation, and then prosperity, which is all fine, well, and good. But this is where things kind of took a turn to marketing Prop 479. And these are the proposed areas that they would be looking at improving. Nearly doubling funding to expand bus transit. Again, I don't want to segue on that, or like high capacity transit. I mean, are those things that people are going to use? But I want to call that out so that everybody kind of collectively knows, right, what's happening, right? And things that are considered. you can see that there are critical freeway linkages that they're looking at doing for SR30, reconstruction of I-17, because anybody knows that, it's a mess, especially once you pass like the Anthem and New River area. If you're going up to Prescott that way, it's a mess. ADA paratransit, that makes sense, right? Like, we want to be accessible. And then you have SR24 and then the widening of the 347, which, for those of you who don't know, the 347 is not quite out in AJ, but it's like south of Chandler and kind of south of the 10, where you get to the city of Maricopa, or the town of Maricopa. And I used to work out in Chandler, and that 347 going out to Maricopa is a hot mess. And it's kind of like the East Valley's equivalent to what happens when something happens along Grand, where all of these people who live up here get stuck, or vice versa. Same thing would happen on the 347. So, like, that makes sense, right? But here's where MAG went into Northwest Valley improvements, and you can see, right, like arterial road widening, traffic interchange, new roadway. I'm talking about expanding El Mirage from the 303 up to Jomax. 303 to I-10 corridor improvements, which is great if you need to get into town or get down to the 303, or excuse me, the 10 rather. 60 at Loop 303 ultimate system interchange, but again, we still don't know what that looks like based on the presentation from ADOT. And then grade separation. If you don't know what grade is, right, like grade, consider like, I don't know, sea level, ground level, whatever you want to call it, is at grade. Anything above that is an above grade separation or a below grade separation, kind of like what was done several years back at Grand and Bell, where we have that separation. And this kind of goes more into a study that they are looking at doing. Purportedly, MAG is going to contact me and some other folks in the community, try to hold some meetings and whatnot when they get into that. And this kind of summarizes everything that MAG just talked about. So I'll pause here once more. And then they went into like thanks questions and a couple of the contact informations. So here's where I say we need to make sure that we're not letting off the gas, so to speak, is, again, these presentations are all linked here if you want to review them. And then I do also have kind of like some anecdotal synopses of the concerns, and then also this area info and data, which this presentation was actually shared on December 6th with Mayor Hall and some other folks within the city of Surprise. And you can kind of see 75 square miles is how large this area is of road, with a lot of these relying on Grand 303, Happy Valley, things of that nature. Talks about how large our population has grown. And then even on slides like 13 is where I talk about risks and public safety issues in this presentation. And this data came directly from a dashboard that's available on the City of Surprise website. So you can see, right, like our collisions are up. Fatal collisions are up 300%, right? Our fire station that's up at 163rd, just past Asante, has a longer average response time, which is concerning because fires double in size every 30 seconds. And then what's really crazy to me is we have a proverbial tinderbox going on where we have these unsafe roads, we have all of these houses packed in, more houses getting packed in, more rezones happening, more buildings going up, commercial, residential, or otherwise. And then we also have DUIs that are up right here, which really, when we were looking at that heat map, that's kind of why I was saying I'm curious how we stack up. And that's why things like, myself working to put the site out there, get the information out there, get the petition there, right? And I am going to work on getting newsletters out. It'll probably go out like once monthly. I may do every 2 weeks, just depending on what's going on, if things are changing that rapidly. And then just because I know we're all very busy and not everybody's going to have time to sit there and read through a novelization of everything or read through all of the statutes or municipal codes or anything, I am working on starting a podcast to, and I'll invite residents to it. I'll invite, people who are running for mayor or city council or anything of that nature. I mean, heck, I'll even throw out invitations to some of our state legislators just to provide people an avenue to speak their mind, share their opinion, share their stances if they're an elected official or running for an elected office, and continue to keep everybody in the loop as much as I can. Because I think it's probably easier for some of us to find, 30 to 60 minutes in our day to listen to a podcast while, you're doing the dishes, you're running a load of laundry, you're, commuting to and from work or whatever the case may be, versus finding the time to sit down and read something. And so that I was inspired to do that. I am doing it. My goal is to try and launch it sometime this month. Tentatively, I threw out the date of January the 16th out there. So you'll want to be on the mailing list if you would like to get notified for that as soon as it pops and goes live. I'm going to try to get it out to all the platforms too. But we can't let up, guys. And even though, we may not necessarily agree with an individual or a group of individuals' approach, whether it's you don't like what I'm doing, you don't like what somebody like Joe Mansour is doing, or you don't like, the little pockets of folks who we're talking about, protesting at 163rd and Grand, or hanging up signs saying don't buy a home here, or whatever it is. We're all on the same side of wanting change. And I think that that's what is most critically important out of all of this. And we need to remember that at the end of the day, we all are given inalienable rights by the Constitution and by the Bill of Rights, including our First Amendment right to speak our minds, be able to gather, and, be able to speak up in favor or against a particular course of action that our government is doing, and they work for us. And we really need to be an informed populace to combat the way that things are working. Because the more that I've personally researched, the more complex I've realized that this is. And it's crazy. And that's why I was motivated to create the sites, now starting the podcast, starting a mailing list, things of that nature. So everybody needs to keep fighting the good fight. I will be around and active on social media. You can contact me through the site, things of that nature. If you would like to reach out, I encourage people to reach out and speak with me. And have a great day, everybody. And again, reach out if you need anything. And thank you for your time.